YUNKJunk!
Hey everybody, welcome to Tubby Talk. It's hosted by me, Steve Wright Jr., and
I'm Chris. Oh, Chris McGuire of Tubby Robot and Tubby Talk and YUNKJunk Studios.
I figure we should be formal because we've done so many of these now. Like, you should know who we are. If you haven't been to the shop yet, but you watch Tubby Talk, you can learn that. My name's Steve Wright Jr. I am not related to the comedian, though I love the guy. He's great. And this Chris McGuire, not related to the U.S. soccer player.
No, or the guy who hit all the home runs. Mark
McGuire?
Yes.
With all different. All the creatine.
Yeah.
We don't have any performance enhancers here. We're just straight natural from the earth.
The gut juice.
From the guts of the earth.
Yeah.
Speaking of guts of the earth, today we wanted to talk about AI.
Yeah, speaking.
As far as how AI relates to gaming, since that's one of the topics that we love, and we were just having a conversation about that earlier.
We were on the way here walking. We were basically like, oh, what do we got to talk about? And it ended up like all day today we were talking about AI and games, actually, as we were making ice cream. Yeah. And specifically, like, everyone's talking now about ChatGPT and, generated art, which is a very interesting topic, but I feel like there hasn't been as much attention paid to how it can affect gaming. And I know this is something like a lot of gamers have seen as the holy grail, be like, oh, true artificial intelligence, like, would make my game so much better. But then you think about it, like, would it?
Well, so, I don't know, like, I always wonder if it's a segment of gamers that want that to happen, that are the same segment that also want games to always be free and always work perfectly and get upset when they cost money and maybe have bugs.
Yeah.
Because I could see them thinking that, like, oh, if you have AI in games, then devs don't have to make enemies that are smart or boss encounters that are clever. They'll make themselves smarter, clever, and they can just focus on the art assets. And I could see a point to that.
Yeah.
Too, but
of course, if they're an AI company, they may not make the art assets at all. And they'll just be like, hey, make a bluish hedgehog with points. Like, done.
and then you get Ugly Sonic from the first Sonic the Hedgehog movie trailer.
Yeah. But what's interesting about it all is that the people who are calling for that, like you're saying, maybe there's a type, and I say this non-judgmentally. Most of the people have talked about like that being the holy grail for decades. Maybe they're people who want the games to be their friends. A lot of the folks I've heard talking about this maybe don't have a ton of friends in real life, and they would love to have a generated friend in a game, which I kind of get the appeal.
Yeah, and like games have been there have been attempts at games like that for a while. Like, I know we were talking about Peter Molyneux.
Yes.
The French game developer, or French Canadian. I think he's French Canadian.
No, I think it's straight on French.
It's from
Lionhead Studios. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So he's from France. He made games such as Fable.
Yeah.
And he also made a game called tried to make a game. It's a tech demo called Project Milo.
Yeah.
Where there's basically a little boy. Like, he lives like in a field. It's like very cartoonish CGI kid, with creepy eyes. We've seen a clip of it.
Yeah, so this was on the Xbox 360.
360, yeah, with the Kinect AR system they had.
Yeah, so it was a tech demo for the Kinect. So it was like, hey, this thing can see you and hear your voice and interpret what you're saying. And so they had this demo where you would talk to this little boy, and it was supposed to be a very convincing thing, like, hey, you're talking to a real human. It doesn't definitely deep in that uncanny valley.
Yeah.
Like, it hasn't even reached the uncanny valley, I would argue. Like,
yeah, actually from the clip we're seeing here, like, actually doesn't even look that creepy.
No.
Actually, the eye tracking seems to be maybe overtuned. Whenever she looks away from the point the kid's at on the screen, the kid looks at the same point on the screen. I noticed, instead of like continuing to look at her, like she looks at the center, he looked at the center.
I remember when this came out, though, people were very excited. They're like, oh, this is neat. Like, you can do this now. Like, this is the future. Yeah. There's an AI boy that you're talking to. It was never released, I don't think, like commercially. It was just a demo, but I think that shows like a lot of this technology, A, wasn't ready for prime time, and B, like probably couldn't be done on that hardware.
It probably outpaced the Xbox 360 or the Kinect's capabilities. But that being said, so yeah, to your point, that being said, like, what is the game you make of that, though? Right. Unless you want to raise a kid virtually, which I don't want to raise a kid in real life, so I don't want to raise a kid virtually either.
Yeah, it's not really a game. The only way I could see like talking to someone being alone, like being a game, is if what's your goal? And the only goal I can think of, the first thing that comes to my sick mind is like,
World
drive this
domination?
person insane. Can you drive this person to do something horrible? Like, can you basically coerce them into hurting something or breaking
Can
something?
you create a serial killer?
Can you make a serial killer? And honestly, that would be a fun game. Talking somebody into something, gaslighting the video game.
Well, so we were talking earlier about there's an episode of Black Mirror involving AIs.
Yes.
Which was kind of at least a worst case scenario for me, like with my, viewpoint on like how I would like my life to go and other people's lives to go. It was the Christmas episode, came out like 7-8 years ago. There was a company that was making an AI assistant, and they copied the user's personality and then put the user personality into a computer. Basically, it made them schedule tasks for them.
Yeah.
And they thought that because it was that person's personality, they would know them best.
Yes. Who would be a better personal assistant than you yourself?
And then the problem with that was you might not want to be a personal assistant living in a computer to yourself.
Yes.
That lives outside of a computer. And that was kind of the technical hurdle they had to overcome.
Yeah. And it was basically you were a slave to yourself, because one thing your brain is being scanned, and the next thing you are in a white featureless room, and they're like, well, every time you get a request, you got to answer it. And the horrifying thing about that sticks with me to this day is they'd be like, oh, you don't want to pay attention? Well, I can just make 10,000 years happen in your time. Seconds will pass for us. So you'll be in this featureless room where you can't do anything. You have no stimulus and you can't kill yourself. There's no way out.
You're here for a long time.
You're here for a long time just with yourself, being driven mad to obedience in their mind, I guess. And that's the question it posits, the morality of a copy of a human mind, which is horrifying. Like, it's hard to think of something scarier than that.
Yeah, and then, so like to take that and scale it back even to like, an AI, but that is designed for basically the same function, using the same methods. Like some kind of like heuristic punishment?
Yeah.
like detriment system. Like, you don't do a thing properly, you get punished. Where it seems like AIs now are fed information to as additively.
Yes,
right. Give them positive reinforcement as to what they should learn, like what should be learned by the program.
Yeah, so I'm not
mostly positive,
an expert on these subjects, but I've dabbled, and there's machine learning and artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence is kind of like based on machine learning, and a lot of the things we see as AI now is actually like machine learning, and that is taught by training. So if you're like, hey, I want to teach this computer what a dog is, I'm going to give it 10,000 images, and it's going to go through and say, is this a dog? And you say, no. Is this a dog? Yes. Yes. No. No. Yes. And you do that 10,000 times. Eventually, it will get a pretty good idea of what a dog looks like.
So I guess the machine is learning by being like, you said this is a dog. It's a dog-shaped object, but it's made of wood.
Right.
So the machine, quote unquote, sees it and is like, oh, that's wood, so therefore it's not a dog.
Yes.
But then what if you see a dog that has a natural wood grainish coat?
Yeah.
Does it think it's a dog or not?
Like, it can, yeah. Well, and that's the issues that you run into. I know there were a lot of things based on skin complexion with computers recognizing people, and it was just like the training data they used was lighter skinned people, and they never tried it with darker skinned people, and it didn't necessarily work very well. And they were like, well, this machine's racist, and it kind of was trained to be that way.
Well, yeah, because like there was a TV show that I love from like the 2000s. And it was an evil corporation that it was about. It was office workplace comedy. And that was one of the issues they had in an episode. They wanted to save energy, so they had the lights turn off when nobody was in the room. They had doors open and closed only when people were walking towards them to save on AC costs. They extended it to water fountains. Even the water fountain would only turn on when a person was there, so it would not waste water.
Yeah.
But they were all trained on lighter skinned, reflective skinned individuals. So then you had
a whites only water fountain.
Yeah. So the black employees were not registered by the censors. Yeah. So they had to hire white people to follow the black people around to let them in the doors and turn on the water fountains. And then they deemed that racist in HR because it was affirmative action for white people to get hired for every black person they hire.
Yeah.
But then if they wanted to keep their diversity numbers even, they'd have to hire more black people, but then they hire the same number of white people. And so they decided to make a blacks only and whites only fountain. where the Blacks Only Found did not have a sensor. And yeah, they finally realized maybe this whole thing won't work and we should just train the sensors.
Yeah, and yes.
But so then fast forward to today, and I bought the Pixel 8 phone from Google, and that has a feature. The Pixel 7, I think, had the feature too, where it adapts the color, like the white balance, artificially for darker skin tones. Which is, certainly because there's a lot of people of darker skin tone that use Google products and that are, working Google, including, I think, this current CEO, right?
I mean, Android is the largest.
Well, the Android CEO.
Yeah, Android is the largest
operating system
for cell phones in the world. So everyone around the world
is using all sorts of different colors and complexions.
So does it work better?
I use it a little bit. I was showing it off last Thanksgiving at my brother's house.
Yeah,
and it works. There were a wide swath of skin tones, and we were able to lighten it for the people that were darker skinned without the people that were lighter skinned being washed out, and it worked really well. We could also erase people out of the background, which I know they've been advertising a lot for the newer phone. I think it's creepy. But as a tech demo, it's cool, and as something that could be used, you could be cognizant of for the future. I really like it. That attention was paid to it, and that's one of the reasons I bought the phones, because I was like, oh, that I have a phone that can pay attention to that, it's worth it to me.
Yes,
to upgrade my phone.
That makes sense. Those generative elements, though, like that kind of calls to mind things I think we're going to be seeing very soon. So right now, there's a lot of things on Steam that people consider asset flips. They buy a pack, or they get an open source pack of 3D models, and they throw together a couple an engine, and they're just like, it's some crappy shooter. We're going to be seeing generated games. Right? Like people are like, you're going to say, all right, I'm going to mash together a couple things. Make me a platformer that, the person jumps and they shoot fireballs, and theme it to, I don't know, Mork and Mindy. And they'll do it. And
I would love a Mork and Mindy. See, that's the thing. I would love a Mork and Mindy side-scrolling platformer. I'm the only one that would. Mm-hmm. A developer would not spend any work hours or budget to make that for me. The question for me is, I don't know if I want an AI to generate that for me, because then why would I need developers?
Well, it might
who are people that earn wages and make money.
But you might say if somebody gave you a prompt like, hey, you can make any game you want with a couple sentences, which we are very close to being able to do, like weeks, months. It's very close. Would you play with it? And maybe it would be fun to play with.
I would love it as a tech demo. I would love it as a small game, especially if it was like maybe supported by like an indie developer, somebody behind it that's not just licensing some ChatGPT or like, I forget the art one's called, but like that, not just licensing the existing engines, machine learning engines, but actually using something, or using those straight something bespoke. I would support that. Yeah. If it was, like you said, an asset flip, but just a very high tech asset flip, I wouldn't support it. Just say I don't support asset flips now. Right. It is a very cool idea. And one part of my brain is like, I would love to play around with that. Like when ChatGPT first like released, I was like, oh, I'd love to play around with this. The more pragmatic side of my brain is like, them just helping it get better at the things that I don't want it to eventually replace people for.
Because these are things that the more you use them, the smarter they get. And this is something I know in the past we've had talks with Terry about Mugen, which is basically a Street Fighter clone maker. Yeah. You get to program
asset flips. Yeah.
Right. You get to clone, basically make a fighting game with any character that you can draw or get sprites for. Yeah. And you get to say what they're. You could take Mugen and be like, hey, AI, I want to basically make Mega Man X fight Jake the dog from Adventure Time. And Jake the dog should have an attack where he grows his arm into a giant hammer and smashes. And like you say a couple things and
it generates it for you.
Yeah, like Mugen could be absolutely anything that you can prompt an AI.
As a tool, I would love it.
Yeah.
As the main course of the gaming experience, I would not.
Yes.
I would love it as a tool to, like you said, that scenario sounds great. I don't want that to replace fighting games that are made and tailored to human, like, because like that fighting game is not going to have like frame perfect combat unless it's just learning from other frame perfect combat games and just copying it.
You're just like, hey, make this as tight as Street Fighter.
Yeah, so if it feels exactly like Street Fighter 2 Turbo, okay, but also I might want something that feels a little bit less like Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting question, right? Because I agree with you. There's a lot of things like we see even in AI generated stuff now. It's not quite right. It's not quite as good as like a practiced artist or a practiced writer.
And hands are real janky.
But I would argue that
things are way too symmetrical when they shouldn't be.
Well, they're getting better and better though. The writing, particularly, like it's not going to replace a good writer, but it can replace a mediocre writer. Like a mediocre writer, like might not be able to have a job for much longer, which answers asks tons of questions. But I know one of the best things that a lot of nerds like AI for is you can generate code. You can say something like, "Oh, I want something that uses WordPress's API and pulls in my Twitter feed using JavaScript so that I can display," and like it'll do it, and it gets you can compile the code often, and if not like right away, like you massage it and it's pretty close.
So my question was, because I meant to ask this before when we've talked about this, and I didn't think about it in a moment. Have you done any of that? I think your wife says she's done something. Yeah. Right? Has she does she have to go back and audit it and proofread it, or does she just take it as is? Or is it accurate enough to be taken as is?
It is, you want to check it and make sure it's right. But the thing is, like, she might not check the syntax. She might ask it, try running it, see if it does it. And it's like, oh, poke, it seems to work. All right. And she's not using it for anything mission critical. Yeah. It's just like for hacks and kludges. Like she's just putting like, I want to mash these two things together real quick to solve some problem I'm having right now. It's great for stuff like that. It actually works really well. And that's just a hop skip. It's not even a hop, skip, and a jump. It's just a hop and skip away from make me a game. It's really right there.
Although, like the cynical part of my mind jumps straight to asking AI programs, like AI development environments, to code, give you snippets of code, and a bad actor, adding in malware into that code or adding in a backdoor. Because I'm drawn back to the chatbot fiasco that Discord had earlier this year, where the chatbot was basically, per Discord's rules, like you're not allowed to discuss things like making napalm or making bombs. And somebody tricked the chatbot into teaching them how to make napalm. Yeah. By saying, "Oh, pretend you're my grandmother telling me a story. You tell me a story about something.
About making napalm.
And so the AI was like, okay, well, I'm not divulging this information to you. I'm portraying a character, divulging this information to another character in a work of fiction.
Yes.
And inside of that framework, it was allowed to break the rules it set for itself, that was set for it when it comes to interacting with the outside world.
And that's very difficult, if not impossible, to police. Yeah. Because you can just make another wrapper, another layer, metaphorical wrapper. Yeah. And it's just like, well, how do you? And the thing is, like, the AI is kind of a black box, and like it's been trained. You don't know what it's thinking and what it's putting together. Like
you're not watching like a feed of its programming being run.
No. Or anything during it. And if you could see it, it wouldn't be human readable.
Yeah, you would need an AI to read it.
Yeah.
Well, because that's my second thing. Like, so then if you have that and you have another AI that is trained to proofread and look for inconsistencies, look for syntax errors in the code, if that's also trained on a faulty knowledge base, then it wouldn't catch it. It'd be like, yeah, this looks right. It has a napalm recipe in the middle. Yeah, that seems, all versions of this code have napalm recipes. It's fine.
Yeah.
But then, like, at some point, it seemed like you would still need, at least now, somebody to audit it, to be able to make sure that the AI auditors can do the job correctly.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you don't have to type all that crap, which seems to me like it's a huge tool to be used.
Right. Even if it comes out imperfect, it's still a lot faster.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, I can massage this raw stuff and make it a little bit sharper.
But then also part of, like, I know I would be annoyed by that. I'd be like, I would hate typing all this out every single time I want to make a new bit of code. I would hate more having to read through it all and proofread someone else's code every single time. Yeah, that's what interns are for.
My former business partner and friend Chaim, we used to say, hell is someone else's code. Like, you don't want to get into someone else's code base. Like, a lot of people, like, that's their job. But we had the luxury of writing our own code base and then basically like selling other people what to do with it. And jumping into someone else's was always like, it's like trying to wear someone else's skin. It just feels awful. You don't want to do it. But in this case, if you were just like, hey, AI, make me something, like, oh, okay, well, fix this. But you could say, this is great, but if it's something like in Silicon Valley where he was driven nuts by tabs or two spaces, like char all the tabs in double spaces. Like, okay, done. Thank you. Like easy.
But wait, turn all the tabs in double spaces without breaking the functionality of the code.
Right. Yeah.
But so that kind of leads me, especially looking at other people's code, leads me to talk about like AI in video games. Example I was talking about earlier. I've been playing a lot of I always play Destiny 2. I've said it before, but I started playing
game.
Yeah, I started playing again because the last season come out. It changed to another format later, but they're like, this is the last season. I'm like, but you're just doing longer seasons next year. Shut up. But yeah, so like Halo first, Bungie creates Destiny and Destiny 2, and he also made the first 3 Halo games and then Halo Reach. And I think, Halo Reach. So like the Halo 2 and Reach especially were always praised for their enemy AI, where the enemies are often not just reactive to the player or not just taking actions on their code base, but having a merger of the two.
Yeah.
And there's some enemies, they're called Taken. They're basically dark matter zombies.
These guys.
Yeah. And so like these enemies, they split into 2 every couple seconds, I thought. I played this game for like 7 years. I never realized until I read a document the other day on this game that when you aim down sights on your gun, when you scope, they split. If they haven't split recently, they will split as soon as you aim down scope. Yeah. So you aim down scope, you see nothing, and you unscope, and there's 2 enemies just outside of your, aim,
you were telling me
the predicted aiming.
You never
range.
realize this because you scope every time.
Yeah. So I always scope, so I never noticed there was a difference.
This is what they do.
Yeah.
But you're like, oh, well, the cheat, it's not the cheat, but their design, you're supposed to try to kill them without scoping.
Yeah. Right? And so like when you get down to like 1, they start splitting again. So if we get down to 1, you have to kill it before it splits into more. But since I always scope, I don't see the 1. Then it shoots me and I shoot it and now there's 5 again. And I just always hate these enemies if I don't have like a grenade. But yeah, so like just realizing that happened, I was like, what other AI tricks have I not noticed? Like I know there are lots of enemies that will hide behind the geometry.
Yeah.
And sometimes they will, if you look at them with your reticule, they will hide until you turn away. Like they won't come out, which is very annoying because I'm used to playing other games where it's like, oh, they're going to come out in 3-second loop, or like between 1 and 3 seconds, they'll peek out and try to shoot again.
Yeah.
Some enemies, they're called the Fallen. Some of the lower enemies will stand behind a big machine like that for 30 seconds until you do something or other enemies spawn to distract you and steal your attention. Which is smarter
because like a real person would be like, hey, I'm going to get shot if I poke my head out. I'm not going to poke my head
back out. He shot at me twice. Yeah. Like, I'm going to sit back here and wait. So it was always interesting to me because I love that an AI in the game could be that not intelligent, but that robust.
Yeah.
That is not just reacting to what I'm doing. Because lots of games, they just react. Lots of games, they also just attack. And they have their own patterns, and you're figuring out their patterns, like a Dark Souls game. If I was playing a Dark Souls game where the enemies all reacted to me 1-to-1, like the game Sekiro kind of does that with like the bigger enemies, like the mini bosses. If every enemy did that, I would hate it. Only because like some of the parts of those games, like especially with Destiny 2, it's you want the power fantasy of being able to take out all your enemies with your guns or your abilities and blast through the stage.
You want some predictability. Like you want the fun part about a game, in my opinion, is you figure out the patterns and you abuse the patterns.
And you learn and you use it. Yeah,
right.
And so like I like a Souls-like game because they have it's all patterns. It's all learning how to survive, if not abuse the patterns.
Right, because every enemy is going to do the same thing in that situation every time.
Yeah, it's just the same thing is hard to avoid until you get good at it.
Yeah.
And like in a game like this, they can't have too many enemies that do too many disparate things because you would never be able to learn how to fight the enemies.
Right.
They normally limit it to 2 enemy types a mission, just to make sure that you're not running around like super confused.
Yeah.
But there are missions where they'll be like, oh, there's 4 enemy types. All of them have different weak spots. All of them do different things. Half of them teleport. And that's like the higher difficulty activities they have are just ridiculously convoluted. And it kind of goes from being, oh, this is kind of fun and interesting to this is annoying. They shouldn't be so smart.
Yeah.
Or they shouldn't act so smart, I guess. So like
it's less game-like in that case, right?
It's turning up the difficulty by just making it take more bullets. But instead of taking more bullets, it makes it avoid your bullets more. So you run out of bullets, which is not the same as like making the enemy more intelligent.
Yeah.
So I would love it if AI was able to make a game characters intelligent, but not to the point where I cannot beat them, unless that's what I want. Like, I don't want a Star Trek scenario where they're like, oh, make a holodeck creation that can defeat Data in like cognitive ability, and they made a Moriarty hologram that realized he was not a hologram, became sentient.
Yes.
That was the only way for a computer to do it, was to make a sentient hologram.
Yeah.
Be
careful what you wish for, sort of thing, in AI form.
Definitely a monkey paw scenario. But the last thing about Destiny I wanted to bring up this episode, it'll come up later, I'm sure. Is the code base is the same engine. They use the same engine they used for Halo 2, I think, if not Halo 1. And it was designed for Xbox. So things were designed for 30 frames per second. And like the physics cycles were based on that. So when you get to Destiny 2, which at the current moment is like 20 years out from Halo.
Yeah, a long time.
They literally use the same engine with the same code base, because they made it and owned it, so they took it with them when they became independent. Nobody there coded anything for Halo, let alone for Destiny 1, because they've all been replaced by everybody. But
yeah, it's 20 years.
Yeah, anybody that was programming is upper management. Yeah. They have so many bugs that carried over because of that. Like there's a frame rate bug that they said they fixed last week, and it's not fixed because I died 8 times last night. The higher the frame rate of your system, the more damage certain enemy attacks do.
Yeah, and the reason that happens on a programmatic level is it'll be like, okay, the game's programmed, it's never going to be more than 30 frames per second on an Xbox. Great. So if the bullet enters your hitbox, you take 25 damage, and then the next frame is gone. It's great. Yeah. But if you quadruple the frame rate, and
it's within the hitbox for 4 times longer.
Yeah, 4 times longer. Every check, it's like, oh, it's in there. You get hit 4 times. It was the same thing, but it was more fluid. So it's checking by frame, and a lot of game logic does work by frame. The thing is, if your frame rate varies, you have to have some type of multiplier divisor function to even it out. But apparently they thought they did, but they didn't.
Well, yeah. So and they released like a deep dive. When the devs released a deep dive about it before, when they were like, yeah, we know the problem. We can't fix it without changing the entire code base.
Yeah, because it's baked deeply within like how the game functions.
And I think they had it set to the value set to 30 frames per second. So if for some reason your Xbox slowed down, it was still calculated at 30 frames per second. But they didn't cap it at the higher end. So it would go up infinitely.
Yeah.
So they capped it at some point, but it still was higher than like 144 frames per second, which is what my laptop can run it at.
Yeah, it's common now for like a gaming laptop to run at 144 frames per second. Yeah. There are some that go up into the 300s now if you got some crazy baller display.
Yeah. And so I was just like, well, so they said they fixed it for good last week and they released it. They don't have a testing environment. They put stuff out and then they can only test it live when it's live. They have a sandbox that tests like the guns, but it does not affect any of the physics stuff. Yeah. That's not a gun. So they're like, yeah, we didn't test it because we can't. We fixed it though. I'm thinking to use an AI to comb through the code base to try to either fix or capture all the instances of the bug they know. And either change it or just at least give, they referred it to something else in code maybe. Like, is that something you can do, like, to fix something deep in a code, to have it just all feed out, like have something in the way to massage it, like the data coming out?
Yeah, it's possible, depending on how it looks and how it's structured. But
it seems like it'd be harder to go. I can't replace all the old stuff and be like, give it new physics, because that would break everything, right?
Most likely.
But could you be like, hey, before the physics get applied, send it to this thing, and then this thing does. Oh, I'm going to fix the physics.
Yeah, well, you have a new subsystem for this calculates damage. Yeah. This calculates damage now, and it's not tied to the rest of the stuff.
But like, I'm wondering if they did that, but they're using AI to like find instances, and they missed some. That or the fix, or like the new subsystem just was bad. It's possible they just messed up.
The AI paranoia has got so they're like, is this messed up because of AI? Is they use some faulty AI?
Yeah, because I'm like, obviously nobody knows how it works that's there anymore. They have documents. And they have stuff commented out, the comments in the code. But I'm like, I wonder if they had something crawl it to try to find instances so they can more concretely know what's wrong. But they still didn't fix the problem.
Well, and another place where I think AI might be interesting in a game, when you think about NPCs, say you're playing something like Elder Scrolls, like Skyrim, and normally you talk to an NPC, they got like a stock line, maybe they got 5 stock lines, but like it doesn't have an effect on the world. Yeah. It's just like, oh, I took an arrow to the knee, right? That's the famous example. Yeah. But what if that's all generative, right? What if that is like, hey, this guy's a baker, and he's been a baker for 50 years, and that's his backstory. the AI makes his dialogue. You go up and like, hey, how you doing? He's like, oh, I'm all right. I got some fresh bread. It's like, what type of bread is it? He's like, oh, it's pumpernickel. And you basically can have this conversation. Yeah. Does that make it a better game? Or is that something totally different?
I think for like a game like a Fallout or an Elder Scrolls, I would specifically Bethesda type games.
Yeah,
I would love if those games were able to do that because they have so many NPCs, only so many writers. Some of the interactions with NPCs are very forgettable.
Yeah,
and I'm like, if you want to have this many NPCs and you want people to talk to all the NPCs in town, you should give them something to do. Generative dialogues, generative backstories with them would be great. I would love it as a gamer.
Yeah.
That's also the plot of the TV show Westworld. Like literally, they were all made to have generative AI for immersion.
Right.
And then they started to get negative inputs from users. And enough of that caused their programs to determine that these things are bad and they want to stop them from happening. And then to stop them from happening, they end up becoming sentient. I'm simplifying it a lot, but that's basically was the
difference with Westworld is that it's in a physical world and people physically abuse.
Yeah, but in a game you could also be like, what kind of bread do you make? Oh, I make pumpernickel, whatever. You don't make rye? You're the worst. You're a piece of crap. I hate your bread.
Yeah,
you should never make bread again. And then is the baker going to be like, well, forget you. I'm going to make all the pumpernickel I like. I love it. I'm going to be like, oh, I'm going to make rye. And then you go out of business because they make rye. You come back, talk to them later, and they're living on the street. And you're like, what's wrong? And they're like,
I made rye.
Nobody wanted rye.
Well, think about it. If you get like belligerent, what would happen in the real world? What if you went to the local baker and you were like, make some rye? Eventually, they're going to call the cops.
Yeah.
So like, what if like they call the constable and the constable comes like, hey, buddy, you're not allowed in here anymore. Like, that's kind of it. See, that's why I think
no more rye harassment.
I think that's the main reason people play GTA. At least that's the main reason I would ever play GTA is like you go through like, all right, how much damage can I cause and how long can I get away with it, right?
Like generative
repercussions
in GTA would be fun.
Yeah.
I feel like it would also make it harder, which is kind of going against the spirit of the game, which is you do all this mayhem because you get away with it.
Right.
If you're going to get caught because it's going to evolve smart enough to get you caught. I don't know. Some people would love that.
Yeah, or you just like step it down so they're dumb enough to make it still fun until you get really bad.
Just give them a glaring weakness.
Yeah, like all the cops have a wooden leg, and no matter what, like you're gonna outrun them, but maybe there's enough of them coming because there would get to a point in like GTA 3 and Vice City. Those are the ones I played most. Old now, but tanks would be coming and like waves of tanks and helicopters, and there's just like nothing you can do. And it was fun to get to that point.
Well, you can steal a tank. And you run around with the tank, and they're chasing with tanks, and you have a tank now.
Yes.
But yeah. So like, there are lots of scenarios like that would be fascinating.
Yes.
Especially to see as part of a game. I personally draw the line at making that the game.
I agree.
Only because we differ in this regard. I love narrative games, and games have crafted narratives that are expressed through the gameplay. So I like it like a Mass Effect or something like that. Where, as opposed to a Fallout game, you care about the NPCs and you get information from them that you want.
Right.
Fallout NPCs all feel like Bethesda NPCs feel like filler to me. Like Starfield apparently had a problem with that with a lot of people, where all the followers just seemed really bland. Mm-hmm. And they were just like, I don't care about any of this, but it's here, so I interact with it because it's part of the game, but I don't like it.
Yeah.
So like generative dialogues, or like character or like NPC characterization could help with that. It could help fix mediocre writing and not replace great writing.
Yes,
Bring back to what you said. Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree. Like it could, they was talking about like we were trying to make this living, breathing world, this place feel lived in. Mm. That would be a really amazing way to do it. Like you walk by and you can have a unique conversation with everyone you talk to. Yeah, that's a different world, right? That's amazing.
It makes you want to boot up the game, walk around, see what's happening in town.
But you might never want to play a game. Like you spend all your time just chatting to people.
Well, that's why you do it in the hubs. Like you have all NPCs that you want to talk to in the hubs. MCs out in the world, you might not want to shoot this enemy if they're like, "Hey, don't shoot." You might want to talk to them. Maybe it generates something good for you. Maybe they're saying, "Hey, don't shoot," so they can trick you and then ambush you when you're not paying attention. I would like something like that because that would be interesting.
Yeah.
As opposed to every enemy you must kill because, you know, these are murder simulators sometimes, some video games.
Certainly.
But if it's just like, yeah, sometimes they're like, hey, I want to talk. And they actually want to talk. And it's not something that's programmed in as like, you know, NPC 5 always walks up and says, hey, I want to talk. If it's just like a random one, it's like, hey, don't shoot. Like if I'm playing Destiny 2 and one of the taken zombies that splits, one split is just like, I'm throwing down my gun. I don't want to fight anymore.
Yeah.
That would be cool as hell. Like, oh, I gotta see what's going on with this zombie.
I always love Lord of the Rings. They were talking about how they made the two towers, and they were like, we simulated massive battles between the orcs and the humans at Helm's Deep, and the way when we programmed them all the way we thought that they should, and like how they should interact with each other, both armies just ran away from each other, and they just like, oh, I don't want to die, so I'm not gonna fight in this war. And so they made them too smart, I guess.
They gave them too much self-preservation.
Yeah.
And not enough confidence in their fighting ability.
Right.
Yeah, because if you're like, oh, your goal is to fight, you're programmed to fight and not die right away. Easiest way not die right away is run away.
Yeah.
So there you go. But if you're like, but you're really strong, you got like 100 points in strength, you can do it. You can fight and take a stabbing and survive. But then how smart are you making these simulations for a movie?
There's so many shades of gray in this because you're talking about like you don't really want the game itself to be generated, but there's one of the most popular genres right now is algorithmically generated games, roguelites, and one of my favorites is Binding of Isaac. Yeah. And you think of Binding of Isaac, and it's a new game every time you play because an algorithm is generating it. Now it's not an AI; it's basically like a series of templates that are mashed together. But they're different every time, and it's compelling still. It feels like there's still like an artist's touch behind the game.
Well, because I'm assuming because all of the enemy types that can be loaded into a certain scenario or into a certain room, and all the different rooms are created by people.
Yeah.
Right? Like they're not just like, hey, game engine, make me a room that's X by X square with a mode in it.
Yeah, so
but it's like, here's all the moats we have. Put one of these moats into this room. Like that's probably how more how it works, right? Like there's lots of assets for it to choose from.
I think the way it works is like it has some like a bunch of template rooms, and then it decides like what type of room can connect to this without making like an endless loop. It's like more complicated than that, but at a base level like that.
Because I know, like I always assumed, especially before like earlier games in Binding of Isaac, I always assumed it was just like, oh, make sure you can walk in this one room and walk out of the other room that gets you closer to the end.
Yeah.
And anything else can be randomly generated.
Yeah.
And some games feel like that. And then, like you said, this one feels like you don't get any random combinations of rooms that are just like giant room with one enemy that takes one hit to kill.
Well, and there is a lot here that's randomized. Like the thing is, what makes the game interesting is the power-ups you get are different, and they change the way you play. Like you might have one, normally you just shoot tears and they're kind of slow and they fall fast. But you might get an upgrade that turns your eye into a laser beam that fires every 2 seconds. It is not very powerful, but it shoots the whole length of the field. It's like, oh, that's very different. You might get one that is a charge attack where you hold down the button and let go, and it makes this giant like barf. It changes everything, but it's different. And so it's really hard to kind of wrap your head around what makes it compelling, because like you're playing it and you're like, I want to keep playing, but at the same time, like I know this is just a computer barfing out an algorithm every single time.
Well, so like part of it for me, especially for roguelikes, which are games like the game Rogue, where every time you die you start over again. You don't carry any progression over. I don't generally like most of those games because I like having some sort of progression to accomplish. If it's like everything gets wiped, I'm like, why did I just do that?
Yeah.
Ideally, it's for the gameplay. So whenever there's a game like that where I'm like, oh, I can't wait to see what's in the next room. I can't wait to see what permutation of room and enemies it gives me and power-ups. That's why I play those types of games. But I also, at some point, you will see all of the types of enemies there are. You will see all the types of rooms there are. And you start to see repeats.
Yeah.
If the gameplay isn't solid, at that point is when I'm done.
Yeah, you're like, I'm done with the game.
Like, I've seen it all.
Well, what's interesting about this game is like every time you go through, you feel like you unlock something. Like it'll be little things. Like at the end of the game, say the first time you run it, there's 5 levels to the game. It'll be like, hey, there's a new item or a new character you can play as, and you'll find it somewhere in the dungeon. You're like, okay. eventually you get to a point where like, hey, there's a 6th level now. Every time you play, there's a 6th level.
Yeah, Crypto the Necrodancer did that, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, or they'll be like, okay, you've played it a bunch. Now there's a 7th level every time you play. And now there's a branching pathway that will sometimes take you to another one. So it feels like you're always finding secrets.
Yeah.
And there's hundreds and thousands of items and things to find in the game. So it's still like grabs you. But it's certainly not AI level, but like it's still pretty complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, so like to tie AI into this type of game, like specifically Binding of Isaac.
Yeah.
You have templates for all the different types of stages, or the type of stages that can be made.
Right.
You have templates for that. You have templates for the enemies, templates for the power-ups. I would like to see an AI that's maybe like, okay, we set your game on easy, so we give you powerful power-ups early, versus you set it on medium, and they, not randomly, but they curate where the powerful power-ups will be. Give you a branching path that will find those, and a branching path that will give you normal powered power-ups. But it's something that is placed by like the AI game master each time.
Yeah.
Which to me would feel more interesting than it being totally random.
Yes.
Because up to now we've had totally random or weighted towards certain things. If there's an AI game master that you can even be like, here's 2 players, you give them the same seed, so the same programmed set of circumstances will show up in their run, but the placements of certain things are different because of an AI game master. I feel like that would be a really interesting application of that.
Well, and you talk about that, it reminds me of Left 4 Dead. Because Left 4 Dead, one of their big zombie survival horror game with 4 players. Left 4 Dead was famously had what they call the director.
Yeah.
And the director, I believe, lived in the server, and it would basically say like, hey, we're going to make this type of zombie come out. And hey, it's been too quiet for a while. We're going to make this boss zombie come out. Or it's been too loud for a while. We're going to let you chill out. We're going to give you some power-ups. And now we're going to hit you. Like it was trying to direct this idea of always getting, I guess, scarier.
Yeah, and always changing too.
Yeah.
Like making sure that you don't get overwhelmed. You don't want to play if you're just constantly fighting zombies with no ammo. But you also, like you said, you don't want to run out of zombies and be like, I'm just walking around just looking at stuff.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that, it's interesting because it was a melding of like that idea of a director, of an AI director with 4-player cooperative.
Yeah, and like with this game, like the stages are preset. Like they make the stage, you have the same path, but then there's things that will be different and random, like where the zombies pop out, where they spawn. But even that's finite, right? Like you could probably learn all the spawn points for like certain types of zombies.
Yeah, and I'm not entirely sure, like, I'm not, like, the layouts may subtly shift. I'm not entirely sure. The thing is, the game is so good, I'm not entirely sure what changes. Certainly, like, the boss zombies, they're different. And where
we every time I play this game, it's with you, and we're playing on a downloaded map.
Yeah.
So that map doesn't change.
Yeah, that map doesn't change. And I think it's quite possible the maps don't change. They might change the routing through them, though. Like, they'll be like, hey, this one's closed off now.
Yeah, but
this
they have, like,
open.
alternate route. But they're probably built in. Like, you probably can see what alternate routes would be.
Yeah.
Versus, like, they're adding new buildings or new doors to the buildings.
It's not doing anything like that. Like, it's more like, hey, here's this, like, labyrinth, and 4 doors are closed, 1 is open. And the next time you play through, a different door is open on the way through, but it's all still the same level.
Like, actually, like, what I would love to see is a game where, going back to difficulty levels, like, you put it on easy, there's a labyrinth you have to find your way through. If you have trouble finding your way through, it changes the labyrinth to make it easier for you to get out.
Yeah.
Versus medium, where they leave you to your own devices to solve the solvable labyrinth because it's programmatically solvable. Like it was designed to be solvable. And then you have hard, where if you get too good at sussing out the labyrinth secrets, it adds more roadblocks to you. So you can still solve it, and it's not necessarily changing the exit or cheating, but it's making it harder for you to figure out what, like you start adding illusionary walls or something like that with tells, because you're doing too good at just the standard, like to make it an adaptive difficulty.
Yeah.
I feel like would be a pretty interesting application of it.
Well, and I don't feel like this game needs much more than it has already. Like you can do that.
Oh yeah, and I wouldn't say necessarily Left 4 Dead.
And I'm thinking like this, like AI, a better AI, I don't think it would make this game better. I think it's really well done as it is. The only, like, they're zombies, right? They're supposed to react the same way always. Yeah. They always run at you. That's what zombies do. And if they did anything else, they wouldn't be zombies.
Yeah, you're not fighting zombies.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's why I never really glommed onto those asymmetrical multiplayer games. Where like the Friday the 13th one, where somebody plays as Jason and you 4 other people play as campers that are trying to escape, camp counselors are trying to escape.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, so Jason can do different things. He has like 4 or 5 powers, but a player is playing Jason, so Jason can go wherever the player wants Jason to go at any time. But I'm like, then I'm just playing a multiplayer game, and it doesn't feel the same as if I was playing like a Left 4 Dead against like the director, which is an AI, or which is a computer program that is. Well, an AI's computer program.
But
You know
basically,
what I mean? A rudimentary AI.
a rudimentary AI.
Yeah. Or at least a program that its purpose is to make the game enjoyable for the player.
Yeah.
Direct it like a movie director would do. I don't think a player has the same ability to do that to me, because I know it's a player. If I didn't know it was a player, that would be different.
Well, so, I mean, I think that's
and it's mostly in my head. Like I know.
Yeah.
Some people might
a lot
not
of
make
people
any
are
difference,
drawn
but
to that like PvP element of like I'm with another peer
Trying to
and
outsmart
I'm
another
trying to
person,
outsmart
yeah.
that. But like the most dangerous game is man, and I want to shoot him. Yeah,
I want to level up
depends.
from his yeah. But yeah. So like, 'cause I know I played a little bit of like the Dragon Ball Breakers asymmetrical multiplayer, which has a slightly different twist. It was you played as 4 characters, but not at any time. When you get certain power ups, you become more powerful than the enemy you're running away from. And it lasts for a short amount of time, but it turns the tables on that formula, because it's not just, running away from a person. And if the person's very good at playing Jason, I will never win, because Jason's designed to be overpowered because he's facing four players, other people. So if Jason's really good, and even though other people are pretty good, but Jason's better than the group combined, Jason's going to win. Yeah. Like that's how the game is designed. So this game seems like it had the promise of being like, oh, no matter how good the person playing Cell is, somebody becomes Vegito and destroys them. But it's not balanced in that way. So it didn't really pan out the way I was anticipating.
Yeah, the asymmetrical multiplayer is very hard to balance, and like that's so key, right? Like you have to be like, hey, no matter what, if equal ability players are playing on both sides, you want it to be a really good close fight.
Yeah. So like an AI director in those types of games, to me, would help streamline that and like help guarantee that type of situation.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're not going to, like, you might have a runaway where like, oh, some player finally learns what, something snaps in their head and they're like, oh, I know what I should do now. And they get better during the match. Jason's just like, oh, I'm dead now because the guy or the lady decided to ambush me.
Jason trips or something. Like Jason's running down the hall and he's got to them because they're really bad, but he trips and they're like, hey, Jason's down, go get him now. And like maybe you do some damage at that point.
That'd be kind of fun. Like just to help balance. Now they might do that already in the game.
Yeah.
But Jason doesn't trip in the movies. I don't know why we trip in the game.
Jason be tripping.
Yeah, but like that would make it more fun to add a element of randomness, but not true randomness, of curated chaos.
Yeah, trying to move towards that perfect game of basically equivalence, right? Yeah.
Like I'm not very good at like especially PvP based shooters. I'm not great. One of the things I love doing the most is suddenly focusing and barreling down. No, I don't know what the turn of phrases. I love getting serious and, playing my life and not dying, like playing Heroes of the Storm.
Yeah.
Or playing Destiny 2. If I'm losing and getting getting rolled over, I'm going to stamp this one enemy. I'm going to get at least one kill on this guy that keeps killing me. I'm going to take his health down to half.
Yeah.
And he's going to feel bad about it. He's going to have to go back and heal, but I'm going to fight back.
I'm going to prove he can bleed.
Yeah. Like I was playing Destiny last night and that happened and we were getting beat like 4 rounds to none and they were about to win on the 5th round. And I was like, I'm going to kill one of these guys. I used all my abilities and killed one guy and I felt good about it.
You're basically Leonidas at the end of 300.
Yeah.
Where he's Xerxes and he has the whole army around him and they're like, well, you can't defeat us.
Yeah, we're
and
invincible. And I'm like, I made you bleed.
Yeah, I made you bleed. And we're all dead.
Yeah.
But I made you bleed.
It's a Pyrrhic victory.
Yeah.
But yeah, and of course I killed the guy and then his partner resed him and then the guy teabagged me. So, but for the moment before the teabagging, I felt great. I was like, yeah, I got him down.
Yeah.
And every time I saw him before, I would hit him once and take his life down half and he would wreck me. I fought him for like 5 times that match and he wrecked me every time I saw him. I got a little bit of damage. I was like, I'm gonna kill him. And I killed him and it felt good.
Yeah.
Like every now and then I would want the game to be like, oh, you can survive this mismatched you know, Jason versus lone camper because all the other campers, were dumb and died, or Jason caught them and died. It's like I would still like to have a chance. I don't want the chance to be the computer cheats for me.
Right? There's it's got to be a subtle touch, right?
It's subtle.
Because otherwise you feel like you didn't earn it.
Yeah, that's why I feel like AI would help give that subtle touch either way.
Yeah.
As opposed to the game being like, better than, oops, Jason suddenly tripped. People like, he went to stab you, but this stab did less damage because he missed a vital organ. He hit you in the arm, not in the chest. So that means you have a sliver of health left to do something, Jason.
Yeah.
Where otherwise it's just like, knife hits you, you get hit for 5 damage, and then you die when it hits you in the arm. But
and
that has to be coded in.
Yeah.
But I feel like making that less codified would give people like me who are looking to have fun at something that I might be outskilled at, but still have fun playing, more of a chance to have fun playing it, as opposed to just being like, I just get killed all the time because Jason can always stab me to death when I walk into the cabin. My choices are don't walk into the cabin and wait for him to come out or walk in and die.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, then why am I playing this game if I can only do those 2 things? If there's a chance for me to survive and it's not just Jason not paying attention when I run through the door. But yeah,
if it was some tactical game, like you throw a smoke bomb in there and then you go in and, you have more tools. I guess the game needs to give you the right amount of tools to have some way to counter every situation.
Yeah. I guess also now thinking about what I'm kind of thinking of is I like physics-based games because of that. There's always that quote unquote randomness of physics interacting with the gameplay.
Yeah.
You shoot a bullet into near a black hole in a game that has like a gravity physics. Bullet might get sucked into the black hole and it doesn't actually get through and hit an enemy. So you hide behind the black hole or you hide behind the gravity, like there was a game Sega was making that got canceled, unfortunately, but it was like a zero gravity shooter. You had a jetpack and you could reorient yourself in 3D space. And people got disoriented and then like playing it because it felt too much agency was taken out of their hands from the randomness of 0G.
Okay.
And I was like, I would love that game. I wish it would come out. I would play that game every day because that's the type of game I would love.
Did you ever play Descent back in the day?
The ship going through the caves.
It was a 3D shooter, but with no gravity, basically.
No, I never had anything that could play it when it was
I don't
relevant.
think I did either, but I've seen video and I'm like, it looked mind-bending because you're up and down. There's 6 axes of control, basically. Yeah. But no, I think this is such a big topic, and I think it's something I'd love to talk to with Terry again, because I know he's got some thoughts about like the generative art kind of world, which ties directly into games as well.
Yeah.
We're talking more about like theoretical gameplay stuff, which I think is where the interesting stuff is, but like it's changing everything and it's gonna change even more. So yeah, there's Descent.
so like did like the shot physics change based on what direction you're facing or anything? Or was it just disorienting because you had so much freedom?
Just because you had so much freedom.
Because I would love a game where it's like you fire up and the bullets fall back down after a while because of gravity. Where if you shoot down, they go faster than if you're shooting straight ahead because, something like that would be, like, I think that's what the Sega game had. It had, because you were like floating around in space, like orbit. So you had zero gravity in relation to each other, but you were like near Earth. Stuff would fall to Earth. You would fall to Earth if you got shot and didn't jetpack away.
You can see watching this, like, even just, so you're navigating basically like a maze-like structure, and
you don't know where, there's no mini map or anything. It's like, where am I going?
Yeah, I think there might not be a map. I'm not sure, but you can change your orientation so much that it can be confusing, but it's certainly got its fans. I never played it, so it might be something, maybe they would need a revival.
See, there's a down. They were inside of a planet.
There is a down that just
asteroid
affect your movement.
Yeah. Yeah, I always wanted to play Descent. I always read about it every time I saw it in a magazine. Yeah, it's like Doom in a ship with you have all axes of...
Yeah, like you just turn
in this
and
case.
shoot down. Yeah.
6 axes of...
freedom.
No, is that down?
Right.
It's down in relation to the ship as it was pointed at the moment.
Yeah.
I always love quibbling about stuff like that. Except for Star Trek. Everything's always down in Star Trek in relation to the ship. They always fly... galactic plane below them.
Yes.
For whatever reason. There was like one time a ship showed up sideways and they weren't like, this is weird, it's sideways.
Yeah, but I think we might have to revisit it when we do a little more thinking, some more theory craft, bring Terry in. But yeah, I can't wait to see what's next. It's a little scary, a little exciting. That's the future, right?
Yeah, I would like to say, for one, I welcome our AI overlords if you see this and want to remember me when the culling comes. But also, I would like that the human touch always remains with at least creative things, because humans can create computers that can create creative things. I feel like the truly creative people, because I'm not one of them, don't need computers to create creative things.
Yeah.
And unless somebody who's a very creative artist is programming the AI to create art, I don't trust the art to be as good as what a person can do.
Yeah.
Now, if that person exists and they want to become a polyglot and learn how to do art amazingly and program amazingly and make an AI that can do everything amazingly, then great. But I don't think it's going to happen. Especially not for corporate interests. Like, they're going to want something either quick and dirty or interesting and make them a bunch of money. I don't see there being like, oh, we're going to make this perfect for the art and make sure that the AI doesn't make weird wonky hands forever. But I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. And there'll be, by the time we have more conversations about it, it'll be out of date and there'll be new stuff to talk about. Yeah.
Then we talk about replicants.
Yeah. Well, it's been fun talking.
It's great talking to you.
I agreed to this business meeting. Yes.
Well, thanks, everybody. Again, I was Steve.
I was Chris.
This was Tubby Talk on YUNKJunk at YUNKJunk HQ. Produced by Dylan. Super producer. Or
Super producer Dylan. Thank you.
He brought up all the lovely clips. He hasn't said anything because we didn't ask him anything this episode, but I'll often try to include him in everything because I like to have fun and be inclusive.
Yeah. See you guys later.
YUNKJunk!